Hey everyone, welcome back. I have finally picked up the Kuva Zarr. Screw you, those 1 in 19 odds. Anyways, there are a lot of interesting things I like about the Zarr that came over into the Kuva variant, so let's jump right into that today. My thoughts on whether this is Bramma's successor? Well, I don't think it necessarily performs better than Bramma, if that's what you're thinking, but there is a lot more diverse utility in it, and this is a very big plus. The most apparent change between Zarr and its Kuva variant is the massive buff to the cannon mode. The Kuva variant has 673 damage on the main explosion, which is 4 times higher than the normal Zarr at 175. This is even before the Kuva elemental bonus, which reaches 1076.8 at 60%, or over 6 times higher than the original Zarr. Bramma, for comparison, has 839 damage on the main explosion before the Kuva bonus, so it does surpass it somewhat. Basically, the cannon mode has been brought in line as an effective AoE nuke. The cluster bombs of the Kuva Zarr are actually weaker than the regular Zarr because it has less projectiles, but this isn't that important since most of the damage is in the main shot itself. The cannon mode main explosion also now has an AoE radius of 7 meters, which is just under Bramma's 8.3, and a few other launchers at 8. This is a huge buff though to the original Zarr, which only had 4 meters on the explosion. This represents an over 3 times total area increase and significantly improves its killing potential. Finally, both status and crit chance were once again bumped up on this mode for the Kuva variant. For the Barrage mode, a lot of things changed again. The 10 meter restriction on the Barrage has been completely removed and now shoots out to 40 meters. This is a monumental change that completely changes how the Kuva Zarr plays with the Barrage mode. This makes it somewhat able to snipe enemies and deal with priority targets like Acolytes much more easily. It only has 500 base damage though before the Kuva bonus, barely matching the vanilla variant with 800 once you hit 60%. While the cannon mode has higher raw damage, the Barrage mode has massively increased crit chance to the point that I'd rather use that on the Acolyte if it gets too close. But both modes are extremely effective for nuking Acolytes, which you will see later on, even if I don't build for Corrosive. The cannon mode is much better for general purpose use though, so expect to be using that the vast majority of the time, just like Bramma. While the Barrage mode reaches 111% crit chance easily and the cannon mode only reaches 75, it's quite hard to make that Barrage mode hit the next 200% breakpoint, but cannon mode can pass 100% if you just slap on Combat Discipline and Arcane Avenger, which is pretty easy to trigger with the AoE nuking nature, so keep that in mind. Let's step right into our first build. The most important part is you will want to bring Prime Sure-Footed if you want to use the cannon mode of this weapon extensively because it has self-stagger. This is your generic Bramma build, Zarr build. It's literally the same thing, even down to the Exilus, so this is for infinite scaling when you don't want to bother with other buffs or primers. We build for max viral to maximize our odds of proccing it, and boosting our on-hit damage for Hunter Munitions, which procs on crits. For this purpose, Kuva Zarr has significantly higher status than Bramma, but subpar crit. Luckily for standard steel path, the raw damage output and rather consistent slash will be more than enough to delete everything, especially with galvanized chamber for the bonus multi-shot, as the higher viral damage we have doesn't actually contribute into the slash ticks. The bomblets and AoE size already make it extremely likely that viral will proc, so we're opting for prime cry rounds instead of rhyme rounds for more upfront damage like I said against the fodder. We have our generic crit mods, Critical Delay and Vital Sense. If you aren't running Arcane Acceleration, I would recommend Point Strike here instead so that it feels a bit comfier to use, at the expense of your crit chance, which, like I said, can be patched up with Arcane Avenger. But if you don't mind the lower fire rate, I guess it's up to you. The weapon does have free mod slots, so we're slotting in Amalgam Serration, as it also gives you some free sprint speed. Primed Firestorm extends the base radius from 7 meters up to 11.62. The Kuva Zarr only has a few megs in reserve compared to the regular, so obviously we're gonna have to throw in Vigilante supplies in here, just like Bramma. Vigilante instead of mutation mods because killing Zarr is quite easy and Vigilante set bonus does apply to it. Finally, Primary Merciless for that free scaling base damage and some extra reload speed. This also doubles up on the passive ammo max. This will be your cookie cutter level cap setup for Steel Path Survival. It's pretty obvious how this will perform already, so let's just get this over with. Here are some Dracar Manic Bombards. I just go in and shoot my Zarr a few times, start stacking Galvanized and Merciless. And great, now they're dead. So let's spawn them in again for round 2. And they near die instantly from the slash proc, so that's about it. Nothing fancy, just another Bramma. Let's spawn them in one more time. Now what I like about the Barrage mode is you can actually use it without Prime Sure-Footed if you so choose since it has no stagger. but with the 40 meters on it now, it nearly guarantees you can hit your enemies whether you're in their face or not, and make the shots hit with that massive crit chance. For single target damage, I think the cannon is somewhat similar to the Barrage, especially once external crit buffs come into play. So it will mostly just come down to the personal preference. Neither is significantly better than the other for single target scenarios, like if you're dealing with, say, Acolytes or Demolists, or say even bosses, especially if they're status immune. Now let's move on to the next build. This one is catered towards level cap steel path disruption. We offloaded viral to our primer since primers are much better at applying 10 viral stacks instantly than Zarr. You have two options here. You can either run hammer shot instead of prime cryo rounds, or bladed rounds if you're willing to scope. Just know that bladed rounds only works while scoping, even though it does out damage hammer shot. You will most likely be making use of the cannon mode a lot to deal with fodder and key carriers. Bladed rounds will absolutely destroy the Demolists, like I said, but this is basically just the way to squeeze out every last little bit of extra damage from the Zarr as you can. The concentrated slash procs also makes it perfect for expedite suffering setups. There's nothing really special to this build, so let's cut straight to the chase. You just find some Demolists with whatever buffs you want, make sure you prime with viral and just dump your Zarr into them. It doesn't matter if you pick cannon or barrage, but personally I prefer barrage for this purpose. It can be a roar setup, an eclipse setup, or even an expedite setup. Expedite will be by far the fastest in my opinion because it will instantly apply all the DOTs in one go and also multiply it again, so you basically have an instant eclipse buff. With slightly less base scaling, but you don't need to wait for the DOTs. Roar would be the strongest, but who wants to wait the full 6 seconds for the slash ticks anyways? Now you may be wondering if Heat Inherit is viable on the Zarr, as it has such high status on the cannon mode and in AoE, so you can even pick up an innate heat one. Well, this is the Kuva Zarr Heat Inherit build I'm using today. I can't really test this properly since it's innate toxin instead of heat, so I'm losing 2 slots to make viral first, but these slots would normally be taken by primed fast hands and primed firestorm. So there isn't really a burst DPS increase. On the other hand, I could technically slot heavy caliber or hammer shot in here, but it's not going to be a huge difference as you can see in my testing in a second. If you just take a look at this footage, the heat procs aren't complete garbage, but the main issue is the raw damage is just so high that relying on heat DOTs to kill is just impractical. By the time you get big heat procs, you're already say 5 magazines deep and it should already be dead by then. And if it's not, I don't really know what you're doing. But if you buff up with Roar or other mods like Vigorous Swap or abilities to get those big heat dots much earlier, well, you won't see those big procs, because this buff damage will also buff your massive raw damage up front, and that would have killed them already. So this is another case of like Kuva Heck, where while you can make Heat Inherit work and the stats are there, it doesn't really make sense to, since it doesn't really apply enough heat stacks to make it the main source of DPS compared to the raw damage, and the raw DPS is already so high that waiting for DOTs won't work since they're already dead. Expedite Suffering would be nice, but that only really works on Toxin procs and Slash and not Heat, so I don't really think this is a good idea. The final build today is for generic Steel Path Acolyte farming. Being such a strong weapon, Kuva Zarr doesn't really need to be optimized against base level Steel Path enemies. Going full Corrosive on the cannon shot will instantly destroy all fodder units from the sheer damage. Ferrite enemies will have damage bonus typing on them, and you will also delete them while ignoring a chunk of their armor. The only real problematic enemies will be alloy armor, but the high status from Zarr will also proc Corrosive and strip some of it off. The enemies won't be tanky enough for them to really live a couple of shots from Zarr regardless. Because we aren't relying on DOTs, and this isn't a build intended for endurance but rather just shredding Acolytes, we can go full Corrosive and skip the Bane. This is your one-stop shop to deleting Acolytes instantly in one go. We even have reload speed and fire rate for the fastest burst damage you will get anywhere. Just note that this is tailor-made for bursting down Acolytes. This is not what you would use for endurance, but it will serve you for general exterminate or capture, and etc. kind of missions for Steel Path. You can even say swap this to radiation for Eidolons if you so choose. Here's just a compilation of clips of Acolytes getting instantly destroyed and mauled by this final build. Now I think the funniest thing about Zarr is you can redirect the shot around corners or areas you can't reach by shooting the main shot to ceilings and corners. Brammas can technically do this also, but because there are only 2 main quote-unquote launches with bomblets, this ability remains exclusive to them, so you can really set yourself up as a turret to kill a lot more than launches that would normally require direct line of sight. Another really big thing is how seamless the mode switching is. Just look at this. While I do appreciate the mode switch animations of Tenet Tetra and Ambassador, DE needs to take a leaf out of classic options like Kuva Zarr. You don't need to completely remove the mode switch animations, but you could make them faster and not tie them to the base reload speed of the weapon or forcing reloads. Just a quick half second to 1 second animation for the base length is way more than enough. We don't need some contrived 2.5 second animation like Ambassador has that forces us to reload the weapon as well. Finally, you do have the option to use this weapon even if you don't have prime shift footed or other anti-knocks. The Barrage Mode is insanely strong still and very viable with the crit stat buff. You want to take this to Eidolons? Well, it's extremely viable. Like I said, you just swap the pure Corrosive build to pure Radiation, and with the uncapped range from the Barrage now, it does one-shot. Easily too. It's extremely versatile and accessible to all sorts of builds and configs, and this is my favorite part about it. It's not because it's another Bramma with fat damage, it's good because it tailors to everything you'd want to use it for. This is a strong pickup in my opinion, nothing absolutely game changing but extremely satisfying to use and caters to all situations. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or, better yet, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the Tempest story and the Sisters of Parvos updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm also preparing to get you the info first once more new war info drops. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.